A black billionaire woman is attacked by both a flight attendant and a pilot, but just 2 minutes later, they face the biggest punishment of their careers when a terrible consequence strikes. How will this unexpected encounter change their lives forever? Before we start the story, comment below where you're watching from around the world. If you love stories about transformation and justice, don't forget to subscribe to our channel so you don't miss any inspiring content. Camila Elliott, a black billionaire known for her brilliance and compassion in the business world, stepped into the first-class cabin of the flight after a long, exhausting day. Despite her enormous wealth, Camila didn't like to flaunt it. She always dressed modestly and discreetly, never seeking to be recognized for who she was. Camila believed that what truly mattered was how a person treated others, not their appearance or social status. Today was no exception. Camila wore a light grey coat and simple slacks, carrying a small handbag instead of the expensive, fashionable luggage. As she entered the first-class cabin, she immediately felt the comfort of the spacious area, the soft leather seats, and the peaceful atmosphere, in stark contrast to the crowded sections behind. Camila took a deep breath, savoring the peace she had been longing for after hours of stressful meetings and tough decisions. She quickly found her seat by the window, where she could look out at the vast sky and escape the noise of daily life. Camila gently lifted her bag and carefully placed it in the overhead compartment. Then she sat down, pulled up the soft blanket, and planned to spend the next few hours reading and reflecting on the charitable project she had just completed, a project that would bring change to thousands of poor people around the world. But the peaceful atmosphere Camila was enjoying didn't last long. As she prepared to pull out her book, a flight attendant named Bethany, about 30 years old, appeared. Bethany had worked in the airline industry for years and took pride in the high standards of service she provided to first-class passengers. However, when Bethany saw Camila sitting in first class, her expression immediately changed. Instead of the friendly smile she gave to other passengers, Bethany's face displayed clear suspicion. Bethany approached Camila, her expression cold and her gaze scrutinizing. Camila, busy adjusting her seat, hadn't noticed the attendant's presence yet. When Bethany stood in front of Camila, she couldn't hide her surprise and skepticism at seeing a black woman dressed simply in first class. In a sharp tone, Bethany said, "Excuse me, but I think you're in the wrong cabin. Your seat is back in economy." Bethany's tone was not just a request, but carried a judgment. Clearly, she had automatically assumed Camila had no reason to be seated in first class. Camila looked up, meeting Bethany's gaze, though she could sense the contempt behind Bethany's words. Camila remained calm and composed. "No, I'm in the right place. This is my seat," she said gently but firmly, showing no sign of tension. However, Bethany didn't change her attitude. Instead of professionally checking the information, she continued to look at Camila with a dissatisfied, even slightly disdainful expression, unable to believe that a black woman in simple clothes could be sitting in first class. Bethany asked Camila to present her ticket. Camila calmly took the ticket from her handbag and handed it to Bethany without further comment, but her eyes reflected the displeasure of being unjustly doubted based on her appearance. When Bethany took the ticket, instead of a quick glance as usual, she inspected it more thoroughly than necessary, as if she wanted to find any mistake to confirm her suspicions. Bethany's eyes scanned the ticket, flipped it over, and then looked at Camila with the same doubtful expression. The surrounding passengers began to notice the exchange. They sensed the tension building in the first-class cabin. Some people glanced at Camila and Bethany, wondering what was happening. No one said anything, but the curious looks and sudden silence made the situation more awkward. Bethany finally had to admit that Camila's ticket was completely valid, but she couldn't hide her dissatisfaction. She returned the ticket with an unfriendly attitude and said, "Maybe you're mistaken. This seat doesn't seem to suit you." Bethany's words carried a subtle insult, as if Camila didn't deserve to be there despite having a first-class ticket in hand. Camila felt her blood boil with anger, but she was used to facing situations like this. Many times she had been misjudged based on her skin color and appearance. She knew that reacting too strongly could only make the situation worse. Camila kept her voice calm but firm. "I demand that you stop this discriminatory behavior. I have a valid ticket, and I will sit here." Bethany's eyes flickered with discomfort. She wasn't used to being challenged, especially by a passenger she deemed unworthy of first-class standards. The silence in the cabin grew more suffocating as the tension between the two continued to rise. A few passengers began to turn their heads directly toward the confrontation, eager to see how the situation would unfold. Camila remained outwardly calm, but deep inside, a profound sense of hurt had been triggered. This discrimination, though she had faced it many times in her life, still left an indelible wound. But this time, she was determined not to back down. This wasn't just about a seat, it was about the right to be treated fairly and with respect, regardless of skin color or appearance. She looked directly at Bethany, her eyes filled with unwavering resolve. Bethany, clearly feeling the challenge from Camila, no longer maintained the calm demeanor she had initially shown. She glanced back at the passengers, who were beginning to pay attention to the argument, feeling the growing pressure. Instead of backing down, Bethany became even more resolute. She picked up Camila's ticket again, this time checking it once more, even though everything was already clear. Her eye seemed to search for another reason to prove Camila wrong, even though she knew the ticket was fully valid. "There must be a mistake somewhere," Bethany said, her voice full of suspicion and disdain. "Maybe there's a glitch in the booking system." She stood up straight, casting another glance at Camila with eyes that suggested Camila didn't belong here. Camila, although trying to remain patient, was now losing it. She knew that Bethany wasn't checking the ticket for professional reasons, but because of personal bias. She spoke bluntly but without losing control. "I've told you my ticket is valid. This is my seat, and I'm not moving. If you have an issue with that, I suggest you contact a manager or the pilot instead of continuing to make things difficult." The confrontation between Camila and Bethany seemed to capture everyone's attention in the cabin. Some passengers began to exchange uneasy glances, while others sat silently watching the situation unfold. The curious and somewhat tense stares made the atmosphere even more suffocating. Bethany felt herself losing control of the situation, and she wasn't used to this. Passengers had always complied with her requests without question, but Camila was clearly not someone who would easily submit. Frustration was now evident on Bethany's face, and she decided to use her authority to squash the argument. "I'll have to call the pilot to deal with this." "You're disturbing the other passengers," Bethany said, her tone filled with challenge. At that moment, the cockpit door swung open, and the flight's captain, William, stepped out. He was a middle-aged man with a stern face and graying hair at the temples, a sign of his years of experience in the airline industry. Hearing the confrontation between Camila and Bethany, William entered the first-class cabin with a look of displeasure. Bethany quickly approached him, whispered a few brief words, and glanced toward Camila, causing William to immediately look at her with judgment. William walked over to Camila with cold eyes, not bothering to check or inquire further. He glanced at Camila briefly, then turned to Bethany as if he had already accepted Bethany's accusation without needing to hear anything more. "What's going on here?" William asked, but his tone didn't suggest he was interested in understanding. It was almost as if he had already made up his mind. Bethany quickly responded, "This passenger is causing a disturbance and refusing to move. She's disrupting the flight." Camila, now unable to stay silent, spoke up. "I'm not causing any trouble. I'm simply standing up for my rights. I have a valid ticket for this seat, but the flight attendant has continuously treated me as if I don't deserve to be here." Instead of listening to Camila's explanation, William immediately made his decision. Influenced by his own bias and without needing further information, he coldly said, "You're disturbing the other passengers. If you don't comply with the attendant's requests, I'll have to ask you to leave the plane." Camila looked directly at William, her eyes filled with shock. She was no stranger to being judged based on her skin color and background, but she didn't expect it to happen in a place where she had paid for the best service. "I haven't done anything wrong. I'm simply asking to sit in the seat I paid for. This is discriminatory behavior, and I will not accept this." William, unconcerned by Camila's words, only looked at her with cold, disdainful eyes. In a moment of anger and loss of control, he suddenly raised his hand and slapped Camila hard across the face. The slap echoed through the cabin, leaving all the passengers stunned into absolute silence. Camila felt the sting of William's slap, but what hurt more was the public humiliation and insult she had just endured in front of everyone. The entire first-class cabin fell into silence, the atmosphere tense to the point of suffocation. The shocked, horrified looks of the passengers were all directed at Camila and William, with no one daring to believe what had just happened. Camila held her hand to her cheek, feeling the red mark from the slap begin to rise. She couldn't believe that a pilot, someone responsible for the safety of hundreds of passengers, could behave with such violence and lack of restraint. It wasn't just a slap, it was an act of prejudice and rudeness. Though in pain, Camila tried to stay calm. Her years of facing discrimination had taught her how to control her emotions, even in the most painful situations. William, still maintaining his cold and authoritative demeanor, stood tall. "If you won't cooperate, I'll have to ask you to leave the plane immediately," he declared, his tone showing no sign of remorse or awareness of the wrongness of his actions. For William, this was just a way to quickly regain control of the situation, but he didn't realize that this action not only violated basic human rights but could also bring major consequences for both him and the airline. Camila took a deep breath, her eyes filled with both anger and resilience. She stood up from her seat, grabbed her bag, and without saying another word, walked out of the cabin. The surrounding passengers, still in a state of shock, sat silently without daring to speak. A few glanced at William with accusing eyes, but no one voiced their objections, perhaps out of fear or perhaps they felt it wasn't their place to intervene. Camila walked past the passengers with dignity. Despite the deep hurt inside, she knew that if she reacted at this moment, she would only become an excuse for people like William and Bethany to justify their discriminatory behavior. Instead of letting her anger take over, Camila chose a different path, one where she would handle things not just for herself but for people like her, those who had endured discrimination simply because of the color of their skin. As she stepped out of the first-class cabin, Camila paused for a moment. She turned back to look at William and Bethany, her gaze cold but filled with defiance. "You will pay for this," Camila said in a low, determined voice. Despite the humiliation she still carried, she possessed the authority of a strong woman, one who had faced many ups and downs and would not be easily defeated by societal prejudice. Camila left the plane, but she knew the battle was far from over. In her mind, plans for retribution were beginning to take shape. But this wasn't just about personal revenge. Camila wanted to create real change, not just to seek justice for herself, but to put an end to the culture of discrimination that silently existed in the airline industry she owned. Hours later, sitting in the airport lounge, Camila had already contacted her legal and management teams. She was no longer just a humiliated passenger. Camila Elliott was a billionaire, a powerful woman, and the owner of the airline that Bethany and William worked for. What they didn't know was that Camila wasn't just an anonymous black woman, but someone with the power to change their lives forever. Camila's phone buzzed, showing a string of confirmation messages from her team. The internal investigation into the crew's behavior would begin immediately. Camila decided not to blow up the situation publicly at the moment. She wanted to handle the issue quietly but with immense force, ensuring that the change she would bring wouldn't just be a small lesson for individuals like Bethany and William but a comprehensive overhaul of the airline's culture and treatment practices. The slap William gave Camila didn't just leave a mark on her face, it became etched in her mind, marking the start of a much larger battle. Sitting in the airport lounge, Camila couldn't stop thinking about the injustice she had just endured. As a woman who had risen from hardship to become one of the world's most powerful billionaires, she knew this wasn't the first time she had been discriminated against because of her skin color. But this time, she had the power to change the situation, not just for herself, but for thousands of others. As Camila glanced at her phone, messages from her management and legal teams poured in. She had quickly informed them of the incident and requested that they begin taking action immediately. Every detail of the crew's behavior, especially William and Bethany's, would be thoroughly investigated. Camila didn't want to just settle the personal matter. She wanted to initiate a major reform within the airline system she owned. Every action, every decision she made now wasn't just to regain her dignity but to ensure that the unfair treatment many others like her had faced would come to an end. Thinking of the other passengers, those who may have witnessed the incident but didn't dare speak up, Camila's resolve grew stronger. She knew this wasn't just a single insult, it was a symptom of a larger, deeper issue, a latent prejudice that had taken root in the system and the behavior of many people. Now she realized she was standing at a moment where she could change that. Camila sent a final message to her team: begin the internal investigation immediately. I want to know about all incidents involving discriminatory behavior from the crew, not just this one. Gather all the evidence from the passengers and make sure nothing is overlooked. Camila wasn't the type of person to react impulsively, and she didn't want to turn this into a public scandal, at least not yet. Instead of letting her anger drive her to demand public justice immediately, she chose a wiser path. She would quietly conduct the investigation, gathering all the evidence to ensure that any wrongdoing would be appropriately punished, not just for William and Bethany but for anyone else who shared their discriminatory attitude. She knew that punishing individuals wouldn't be enough, the culture of discrimination had to be uprooted, and that required a comprehensive reform from the top down. Camila wanted to turn this incident into an opportunity for her airline to become a symbol of respect and equality, where every passenger, regardless of skin color or background, was treated with fairness and professionalism. While waiting for her team to begin the investigation, Camila thought deeply about the necessary changes to make a real difference. She knew it would take more than just reforming policies and procedures, it would require changing the mindset of every individual working within the system. This would demand serious training programs on cultural awareness and diversity training sessions that every employee, from pilots and flight attendants to ground staff, would have to attend. Camila wanted to ensure that the change wasn't just on paper but would truly reach every person in every part of her airline. In Camila's mind, a plan was already taking shape. She wouldn't let William and Bethany's actions go unpunished, but more than that, she would ensure that what they did would serve as a lesson for the entire system. She knew this process wouldn't be easy and would face resistance, especially from those who didn't want to change. But with her determination, Camila believed she could turn this painful incident into a historic turning point for the airline industry. A notification rang from Camila's phone. Her team had begun the investigation, with legal and management staff starting to gather evidence. Passengers who witnessed the incident would be invited to participate in the investigation. Camila didn't want any detail to be overlooked. She understood that to create lasting change, every instance of discrimination needed to be exposed and dealt with transparently and fairly. As Camila stood up, gathering her belongings, she was no longer just a passenger who had been insulted. She was a powerful woman, and what William and Bethany didn't know was that Camila had the power to decide their futures. More than that, she wanted to create a system where passengers like her would never have to endure the same humiliation again. This wasn't just about justice for herself, it was about creating a fair and respectful environment for everyone. As she stepped out of the airport lounge, Camila knew the battle had only just begun. William and Bethany might think they had won by forcing her off the plane, but they didn't know she wasn't just any ordinary passenger. She was Camila Elliott, the woman who had the power to change an entire industry. She walked out with burning determination, knowing that what she was about to do would not only affect the two who had wronged her but would also change the lives of thousands of others. They won't know what hit them, Camila thought as she walked out of the airport, her determination ablaze. This fight wasn't just about a personal incident, she was ready to turn the humiliation she had endured into an opportunity to change an entire system where every customer would be respected and treated fairly. At this moment, the internal investigation had already begun. Camila didn't have to wait long. Her management team moved quickly and professionally. As soon as they received her directives, the lawyers and executives reached out to the passengers on the flight to gather information. Those seated near Camila in first class who had witnessed the entire incident were invited to participate in the investigation. They were asked to provide testimonies of what they had seen and heard, helping to build a complete and detailed picture of Bethany and William's behavior. Camila demanded that the entire investigation be kept confidential. She didn't want to turn this into a media scandal, at least not at this moment. She knew that to achieve sustainable change, a careful and clear strategy was required. Rather than immediate public pressure, she wanted her airline to reform itself from within before things could escalate in the media. While the investigation was underway, Camila sat down with her advisors to discuss broader reform plans. She wanted to ensure that what had happened to her would never happen to any other passengers. She called for the creation of a mandatory cultural sensitivity and anti-discrimination training program for all employees, from flight attendants to pilots and senior managers. These wouldn't just be theoretical lectures. The program would include practical exercises where employees would be placed in real-world scenarios to understand the impact of discriminatory actions, whether intentional or not. Camila also requested a thorough review of the airline's customer complaint process. Upon deeper research, she discovered that there had been numerous cases where passengers of color, the elderly, and other minority groups had filed complaints about being unfairly treated, but these complaints had been handled superficially or completely ignored. She wouldn't tolerate this. Camila decided that a new complaint system would be established, ensuring that every complaint would be investigated thoroughly and fairly, with no detail overlooked. In the following days, Camila continued to receive reports from her team. The investigation revealed that Bethany and William were not isolated cases within the airline. There had been numerous complaints about discriminatory behavior, most of which had been ignored or not properly addressed. This only strengthened Camila's resolve to reform the entire system. Bethany, upon learning that she was under investigation, initially appeared confused and frightened. She hadn't expected that what she thought was a mere confrontation with a passenger could escalate into such a major crisis. As for William, though he remained confident that he had done nothing wrong, he too began to feel the pressure from management. They no longer viewed this as a simple incident but rather as a sign of larger issues within the customer service culture. Meanwhile, Camila continued to observe from afar, carefully guiding her team's actions. She was not in a rush to hand down immediate punishments, as she wanted to ensure the investigation's outcome would be handled thoroughly and fairly. Her goal wasn't revenge. It was to make sure that what happened to her would become a lesson for the entire system, driving broader, lasting changes. Once the detailed reports on Bethany and William were compiled, Camila knew it was time to take the next step. She decided to convene an emergency meeting with the airline's leadership. This wouldn't just be a meeting to discuss the recent incident, it would be about how they could transform the company's culture to prevent similar issues in the future. Camila wanted everyone to understand that this wasn't just a personal issue but an opportunity to bring about positive systemic change. During the meeting, Camila presented the findings of the investigation and a specific action plan. She emphasized that the airline must be held accountable for creating a work and service environment where everyone, from passengers to employees, is treated with respect and fairness. Senior leaders listened attentively, realizing that if the issue wasn't thoroughly addressed, it could seriously damage the company's reputation. When the meeting ended, Camila felt a mix of relief and anticipation for the challenges ahead. She knew the path to change wouldn't be easy, but she was ready to lead the process. William and Bethany, along with other employees, would have to face the consequences of their actions. More importantly, the entire culture of discrimination needed to be eradicated. Camila walked out of the meeting room with more determination than ever. She knew that this fight was no longer just about the personal insult she had endured, it was about the future of the airline and how it treated all its customers. The changes she had discussed with leadership wouldn't just impact a few individuals, they would reshape the company's entire customer service culture. With the reform plan approved, Camila and her team began implementing the necessary changes. First, they launched a cultural awareness and anti-discrimination training program for all employees, from pilots and flight attendants to ground staff. Everyone had to attend these mandatory sessions. The program didn't just focus on theory, it included real-world scenarios that employees face daily, helping them better understand the impact of discriminatory behavior and how to treat all customers respectfully, regardless of race, age, or background. Bethany and William, who initially believed they would escape serious consequences, now began to feel the changes around them. Colleagues who had once been friendly with them started to distance themselves, not wanting to be associated with the two. After the incident became a topic of company-wide discussion, some even whispered behind their backs, worried about their own futures as they witnessed the strict measures being implemented by leadership. Bethany, once confident in her abilities, felt deeply hurt when she was required to participate in the training program without a choice. She had never imagined that her behavior towards Camila could lead to such serious consequences. Initially, she reacted with anger and resentment, believing she had done nothing wrong and that it was all a misunderstanding. However, as she attended the first few training sessions, Bethany slowly realized that the issue wasn't just about the incident with Camila but also about her own attitude and awareness of how she treated people who were different from herself. The more Bethany engaged in the training, the more she realized that behaviors she had previously considered normal were actually harmful to others. The biases she held had directly affected her work and the way she treated passengers. She began to regret how she had treated Camila, not because the incident had been investigated, but because she now understood that her actions were genuinely wrong. Meanwhile, William, who had always been confident in his authority and experience as a pilot, began to see his confidence waver. The investigation and the mandatory training forced him to realize that his position was no longer as secure as it once had been. Initially, William defended his actions, believing that he was simply doing his job and maintaining control of the situation. But after hearing stories from other passengers during the training sessions, he began to understand that the discriminatory actions he had once justified were actually unjust and disrespectful. Bethany and William were no longer the self-assured, powerful individuals they had once thought themselves to be. The investigation and training had started to change them from within, forcing them to confront their own biases and attitudes. Camila, though watching from a distance, closely monitored the process. She didn't need to be physically present, but her influence was felt in every decision the airline was making. During the first few weeks of the reform process, many employees at the airline began to feel that the changes were not just superficial but were part of a serious effort to improve the working environment and service culture. They realized that it wasn't just Bethany and William who had to take responsibility for their actions, every employee had to participate in this transformation. The training sessions helped employees become more aware of how even small actions could have a significant impact and how they could improve their service. Complaint procedures were also updated with the assurance that every customer would be heard and that every issue would be handled transparently and fairly. As Bethany and William slowly changed, something important began happening within the airline itself. Passengers like Camila, those who had suffered from discrimination and injustice, now had a chance to speak up. The new complaint system allowed them to voice their negative experiences without fear of being ignored, and under the new system, no case could be brushed aside or handled carelessly. When the initial reports on the impact of the training and reform programs were sent to Camila, she felt a quiet sense of satisfaction, but she knew the fight was far from over. Changing the mindset and culture of an organization wasn't something that could happen overnight. Camila understood that she would need to continue monitoring and adjusting these measures to ensure they were truly effective. With every step forward, Camila knew she was getting closer to her ultimate goal, creating a fair airline system where no one would be treated disrespectfully simply because of their race or background. Amid all the changes, perhaps the most surprising transformation was happening within Bethany and William, the two people who had directly wronged her. At first, Bethany attended the training sessions reluctantly, without much interest. She still believed that everything she had done was right, that her actions towards Camila were just a misunderstanding. However, as time passed and she began listening to other stories during the training, something inside her started to shift. During a discussion on cultural awareness, one of Bethany's colleagues shared a story about witnessing a black passenger being treated less kindly at the airport, which made her feel devalued. Bethany sat silently, guilt starting to stir within her. She remembered the look in Camila's eyes when she unnecessarily asked to check her ticket. It wasn't just about enforcing a rule, it was about suspicion based on bias and prejudice. For the first time, Bethany felt uncomfortable, not because she was required to attend the training, but because she realized she had truly been wrong. She slowly came to understand that what she had done wasn't just a procedural mistake, it was a lack of respect and fairness towards Camila and others whom she had mistreated. One afternoon after work, Bethany sat alone in a cafe, looking out at the bustling streets. She couldn't stop thinking about what she had done and what she had learned from the training sessions. Though the internal change had come slowly at first, now she couldn't deny that the sessions had helped her reflect on herself. Apologies she had always thought unnecessary suddenly felt like something she had to make. Bethany realized that in order to make amends, she needed to face Camila, not as someone under investigation, but as a person sincerely seeking to right her wrongs. Meanwhile, William also went through a significant change in awareness. At first, the experienced pilot felt that participating in the training sessions was an insult to his position. William had always prided himself on his ability to maintain control, and he believed that slapping Camila was necessary to keep order on the flight. But as the cultural awareness training delved into the specific situations that black passengers often faced, William began to see things through a different lens. During a role-playing exercise, employees were asked to take on the role of passengers and experience what it was like to face discrimination for the first time. During this time, William had to confront the feeling of being judged solely on his appearance. He found himself being prejudged without having the chance to explain or defend himself, and that experience made him realize how Camila must have felt that day when she was treated unfairly. His arrogance began to fade, replaced by regret and a sense of responsibility for his actions. One morning, William entered the operations room with a different demeanor. He no longer carried the smugness he once had. Instead, there was a seriousness and weight to him, like someone who had realized a great mistake in his life. He requested a private meeting with his supervisor and asked to speak directly with Camila to apologize. William knew that what he had done couldn't be undone, but he wanted to make amends by sincerely acknowledging his responsibility. Camila, though she had been watching from afar, sensed the changes in both Bethany and William. She didn't need financial compensation or harsh punishment for them. What she wanted most was to see growth within them, and that seemed to be happening. Bethany and William, once the people who had hurt her deeply, now appeared to be learning the lesson she had hoped they would understand. These changes weren't just happening to them. The entire airline began to feel the impact of the training program. Employees from the newest hires to those with years of experience began changing the way they viewed customers. They started to realize that even small actions and careless words could have a significant impact on passengers' experiences. As a result, not only did the customer service culture change, but so did the spirit of solidarity and mutual respect within the company. Camila couldn't help but smile as she read the positive reports about the airline's progress. She saw not only the impact of the training program she had initiated, but also the genuine transformation happening within the people who had once treated her unfairly. These changes, though small, were spreading and creating a much larger difference than she had ever hoped for. She knew that the road ahead was still long, but these first steps confirmed that she was on the right path. Most importantly, Camila knew that she wasn't just changing one airline, she was changing how people treated one another in everyday life. The changes she had initiated were creating a powerful ripple effect throughout the company, but Camila understood that this process couldn't stop at training programs alone. To carry out a comprehensive reform, she needed to ensure that the values of respect and fairness would be sustained and developed over the long term. Once the mandatory training sessions were completed, Camila called for a thorough evaluation of the airline's customer service processes. She wanted every step of the passenger experience to be carefully examined to ensure that discrimination would no longer occur, from the moment customers bought tickets, checked in, to when they boarded the plane. Camila wanted to make sure no one would be treated differently just because they didn't look like the typical first-class passenger. She also requested the implementation of an anonymous feedback system, allowing passengers and employees to share their thoughts on their flying experience without fear of retaliation or being ignored. Camila believed that to create a truly fair work and service environment, everyone, from passengers to employees, needed to have a voice and be heard. Every comment, no matter how small, was valuable and needed to be taken seriously. The reform didn't stop at the service process. Camila also realized the need to change how the airline managed its employees. She asked leadership to review the hiring and evaluation processes, ensuring that potential employees would be selected based on their skills and attitudes, not because they fit the airline's desired image. Additionally, current employees needed to be assessed based on how they treated customers and colleagues, not just their technical skills. Camila paid particular attention to recruiting and training younger employees, those who would carry forward the values of fairness and respect in the future. She knew that corporate culture was difficult to change, but if she could plant the seeds of positive values in the minds of new employees, one day, the discriminatory behaviors she had experienced would become a thing of the past. A key part of Camila's reform strategy was creating a leadership program for promising employees. Those who demonstrated empathy, respect, and commitment to fairness would be trained to become future leaders of the company. Camila wanted to ensure that not only the lower-level staff had to change, but that those in leadership also fully embraced and implemented the values she was building throughout this process. Camila received strong support from some employees and managers who recognized the importance of the changes she was trying to make. However, not everyone agreed with her reforms. Some long-standing managers felt that such rapid and widespread changes would cause internal disruption and negatively affect business operations. They argued that Camila was trying to do too much, too quickly, and unnecessarily. But Camila remained undeterred. She understood that achieving real change required determination and persistence, even when facing opposition. She believed that in time, the values she was trying to instill would naturally seep into the company's culture, and those who resisted would gradually change their minds as they saw the positive results. As the changes began to take effect, Camila frequently received positive reports from both customers and employees. Many passengers shared that they noticed a different atmosphere of service on flights, where they were treated with more respect and courtesy than before. Some employees who had previously felt overlooked or treated unfairly also spoke up about the changes in the work environment, where they now felt more heard and valued. William and Bethany, the two people who had once caused Camila such pain, had now completely transformed. They were no longer the smug, indifferent individuals they once were. Instead, they had become active participants in the reform efforts, helping their colleagues become more aware of their responsibilities. William even volunteered to join a group training new pilots, sharing his experiences and encouraging younger pilots to respect and listen to passengers. Bethany, after months of reflection and learning, had become one of the pioneers in promoting a culture of respect within the company. She realized that treating passengers well wasn't just a duty, it was a genuine joy in her work. Camila, observing these changes from afar, felt satisfied to see her plan coming to fruition. The values she had fought for were not only being implemented but were also gradually becoming ingrained in the mindset and behavior of the entire system. This not only helped improve the airline's service quality but also created a work environment where fairness and respect became core principles. She knew the journey wasn't over yet. Camila still had much work to do to ensure that the values she had built would be protected and developed in the future, but she believed that with the solid foundation she had laid, her airline would become a symbol of respect and fairness not just in the airline industry but in the entire service sector. She also knew that maintaining and developing these values would be an ongoing task. She had come a long way in reforming the entire system, and now the next step was to protect the achievements she had made, ensuring that they would continue to grow in the right direction. On a crisp morning, Camila was invited to a large meeting at the airline's headquarters. This was a special meeting where senior leaders, employees, and representatives from various departments would gather to report on and evaluate the results of the reform process. As Camila walked into the conference room, she saw the familiar faces of employees who had accompanied her on this long journey. All of them exuded respect and admiration for the woman who had led the airline through such significant changes. The meeting began with reports on the progress the airline had made in recent months. Customer satisfaction scores had risen sharply, and the number of complaints had dropped significantly. One of the highlights was feedback from minority customers who had previously felt discriminated against, now stating that they were treated with more respect and friendliness. The values that Camila had established were gradually becoming a reality. Notably, in this meeting, William and Bethany were also invited as individuals who had changed and made positive contributions to the reform. They stood up and shared their journeys, from the mistakes they had made to the lessons they had learned and how they had grown. Bethany, with sincerity, recounted that her confrontation with Camila had become a turning point in her life. "I didn't just learn how to be a better employee, I also learned how to be a more respectful and empathetic person," she said, her voice emotional. William, with his years of experience, admitted that there had been a time when he thought he was always right, but the real-world experiences he had during the training sessions helped him recognize the flaws in his thinking. "I've learned that sometimes strength doesn't come from controlling the situation, but from listening and understanding," William shared. The room erupted in applause after their speeches. Camila, sitting in the back, felt a deep sense of joy. She knew that these changes weren't just the result of training programs or new policies, but stemmed from a shift in the mindset and actions of every individual within the company. Camila didn't need to intervene much anymore, as the employees themselves had become the guardians and advocates of the fairness values she had fought to establish. The meeting concluded with strong commitments from the leadership to continue fostering a customer service culture based on respect, equality, and understanding. In that moment, Camila knew she had accomplished one of the most challenging tasks of her life. As Camila stepped out of the meeting room, she paused for a moment to look around. Everything seemed as ordinary as any other day, but Camila felt that the world had changed a little, at least in the hearts of the people working at this airline. She believed that little by little, these positive changes would spread outward to the passengers, the employees, and eventually the entire industry. Camila stepped outside, taking a deep breath of the fresh air. She knew that this journey would never truly end, but today, she could proudly say she had come a long and meaningful way. Her perseverance and determination had not only changed the fate of a company but had also helped create a more just and better world. Camila smiled, knowing that while there were still challenges ahead, she was ready for whatever came next. Camila's story isn't just about seeking revenge or personal justice, it's a journey of rising up to change an entire system, building a culture of respect and fairness for everyone. Her efforts have shown that even when we face injustice, perseverance and determination can bring about profound change, not only for ourselves but for the community and society around us. Camila turned her pain into motivation to create change, transforming hurt into the strength to fight for better values. This story sends a powerful message: every small action we take can help create a fairer world where everyone is treated equally and with respect. Stand up, face challenges, and never lose faith in the positive change we can bring about. If you feel inspired by this story and want to hear more about change and fairness in life, don't forget to subscribe to our channel so you won't miss out on meaningful content in the future. Together, we can spread good values and make the world a better place.